This is a read aloud of the 3.04 unit test on viewpoint and purpose. Read the passage, a complication or two. The rejection letter from my Ivy League school of choice was the first major obstacle I encountered in my grand 10-year plan. It was not the last. I was 17 and at the time quite certain that nothing would derail me from my grandiose future. I planned to achieve everything my parents expected and more. The first step was supposed to have been attending my parents' alma mater, graduating with honors, and then moving on to law school without pausing to let my peers or competitors catch me. To say that's not how it went is a gross understatement. Needing a distraction in my moment of crisis, I decided to pick up another couple of hours of volunteer service. I rode the subway to Tri Valley Hospital with that rejection letter wrinkled in my right fist. I probably shouldn't have left it at home, but I couldn't bring myself to put it down. I'd spent so many hours volunteering at Tri Valley to build my community service resume that the trek there felt like it was accomplished on autopilot rather than through an active involvement on my part. Alma was a new volunteer that morning, and I felt grateful for her presence, though I suppose I really didn't pay much attention to her. Mostly I was relieved to have something to focus on, other than the big fat rejection letter swelling in my pocket. I showed Alma the volunteer wing, which was really just a room with a few lockers, a microwave, and a lot of large posters with rules and cautionary messages. She shadowed me on that shift, and together we delivered food trays, chatted with bedridden patients who didn't have visitors that morning, and carried out a number of fairly tedious tasks. I forgot Alma's name 3 times and had to apologize. It was a unique name that I shouldn't have forgotten once, but the rejection letter was burning a hole in my pocket and apparently in my mind. At lunch, Alma sat across from me, even though by then several other regular volunteers had arrived and offered to take her out for real food rather than subjecting her to the cafeteria fare. I can't imagine how far gone I must have seemed to her, but I'll never forget what she said as I prodded the chocolate mass parading as cake on my tray. "You must really love what you do here," she said. "I can tell you care about this place and the patients we visited." Her words dug into me, primarily because I had never once stopped to consider whether I enjoyed my time at the hospital. Hundreds of food trays served, hundreds of patients visited, and still somehow the whole experience amounted to nothing more than a check mark on the extensive list of what I needed to accomplish to achieve my goals. I did think about it then as I finished my dessert. She wasn't incorrect. A lot of people hate hospitals, the lights, the sterile smell, the undercurrent of urgency, illness, and tragedy, but I didn't hate it at all. The fact that I was there that day proved more than anything else that I saw it as a comfortable place. Alma and I ended up attending the same university. It wasn't Ivy League, and I wasn't pre-law. Freshman year, I decided to complete my undergraduate degree on an accelerated 3-year plan. Although that 3 years stretched to 4.5 when I graduated, my wife of 2 years, whose name I had not forgotten once since that first day at Tri Valley, was by my side and expecting our first daughter. Medical school was its own unique challenge, especially after the twins came along halfway through. We purchased our first house the year they turned 6, after I landed a residency at Tri Valley. But we slept in a nearby hotel for the first 2 months of homeownership because of a burst pipe that flooded our bedrooms the week we moved in. Looking back, I suppose my life started with that letter. I don't think everything necessarily happens for a reason. There's too much tragedy in the world for that. But there's no doubt that some misfortunes turn into pivotal moments that can alter the course of a person's life for the better. Alma and I have been together for 30 years now, and I still wonder what the other life, the one in which my letter said, "Congratulations," might look like. I expect it would have been pretty grand, full of its own triumphs and pitfalls. My children are fresh to the adult world, and when I see their tears as plans go sideways, I like to imagine that someday they'll sit where I am with people to love, hobbies to pursue, and maybe even a spare dollar in the bank. Question 1. How does the author's viewpoint develop over the course of the text? A. Early in the passage, the narrator is willing to accept a divergence from his plan. Later, divergences frustrate him. B. Early in the passage, the narrator believes that his individual plans are the most important. Later, he believes his family is more important. C. Early in the passage, the narrator believes that a divergence from his plan will derail his life. Later, he believes that divergences shape his life. Question 2. What is the author's purpose for writing this passage? A. To inform readers that medicine is more important than law. B. To explain the training and schooling required to become a doctor. C. To share a life lesson about what led him to become a doctor. Question 3. The narrator receives a rejection letter from an Ivy League school. Which statement is the best reason for including this information in the narrative? A. It sets the narrator on a path where he meets his future wife and has a successful career in medicine. B. It encourages the narrator to think about why he wants to be a lawyer and if that will make him happy. C. It motivates the narrator to spend more time volunteering while going to a different college. Question 4. Which statement best explains the narrator's comment, "To say that's not how it went is a gross understatement"? A. He believes that the misfortune of not getting into his first choice school is the worst thing to happen to him. B. He believes that even though plans didn't go his way, it all worked out well in the end. C. He believes that everything happens for a reason and that's why his life didn't go as he planned. Question 5. How does the author develop the idea that working at Tri-Valley Hospital was a good experience for the narrator? A. By showing the narrator chose to become a doctor and work at the hospital. B. By sharing details about how the narrator met his wife and how they built a life together. C. By telling the reader that things didn't go as planned for the narrator, but they turned out well in the end. Question 6. How does the narrator's reaction to the letter affect the outcome of the story? A. His decision to add a couple of hours of volunteer service leads to a happy life. B. His view of the hospital changes and he sees it as a comfortable place. C. His distracted behavior causes him to impress his future wife. Question 7. How does the narrator's viewpoint about Tri-Valley Hospital change over the course of the text? A. The narrator first sees the hospital as a comfortable place, but then he feels it has too much urgency, illness, and tragedy. B. Landing a residency at the hospital is the only good thing that has happened to him in his life. C. At first, the narrator sees the hospital as a checkmark for his resume, then as a distraction, and finally as a real career. Question 8. Which sentence from the passage best supports the author's purpose? My children are fresh to the adult world, and when I see their tears as plans go sideways, I like to imagine that someday they'll sit where I am with people to love, hobbies to pursue, and maybe even a spare dollar in the bank. B. I don't think that everything necessarily happens for a reason. There's too much tragedy in the world for that. C. The rejection letter from my Ivy League school of choice was the first major obstacle I encountered in my grand 10-year plan. Question 9. How does Alma influence the narrator's life? A. She is by his side throughout college. B. She points out how much he loves his volunteer work. C. She shadows the narrator on his shift and helps him with the patients.